Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
I continue my conversation with Douglas Ferguson. Douglas, an entrepreneur and human-centered technologist, is also the president of Voltage Control, a facilitation academy that develops leaders through various programs. In this part of the conversation, Douglas shares his story related to starting Voltage Control and how the academy is focused on developing collaborative leaders. Then talks about the skills needed for facilitation in any role that a person is playing, not just as a facilitator. The importance of emphasizing on diversity, inclusion, and shared values in creating effective communities that can come together and learn together. Touch upon briefly on his experiences in starting and growing Voltage Control as an entrepreneur and the importance of facilitation skills for any effective leader. And finally, he shares career tips for those aspiring to be facilitators. Listen on. Yeah, this is also probably a good segue to talk about what I've known you as in the facilitation space. And first is, what was the entrepreneurial bug that bit you to start Voltage Control? Or maybe a little bit on what is Voltage Control for those who don't know.
Yeah. So Voltage Control is a facilitation academy. We help develop collaborative leaders through our certification program. And we do other private and corporate trainings as well. And we run a global community for facilitators that we call the Facilitation Lab. It's a free to join place to practice and grow and learn. And there's regional meetups happening as well as online virtual ones too. And we also do an annual summit here in Austin that I hope to take on the road before too long. We had plans to take it on the road in 2020, but there was some things got in our way. I'll just say that. And then as far as the entrepreneurial bug, wow, for the longest time I helped other entrepreneurs, follow their vision as a CTO. It's kind of their right hand man. One part CTO, one part COO. Kind of thinking about the product, thinking about how the technology supported operations, etc. And I think at the end of my last startup, I was just wanting to follow my own path and carve out something for myself. And so I started experimenting with a few things and started reading the tea leaves along the way and started saying yes to the things that brought me more joy, seemed to have potential to create value for folks, and also that there was a market interest for. And it's been a wild, fun ride. Lots of ups and downs, and by and large, a feeling of growth through the whole process. And I think there's certainly this element of I wanted to venture out on my own. I wanted to do my own thing after supporting others for so long, and because I had, as the CTO, I sat beside marketers and salespeople and whatnot in board meetings and executive meetings, and I learned a lot of it through osmosis, but I never had to be responsible for that kind of stuff. So I was kind of curious about what that challenge would be like if I had to jump in and own it myself. And I think as far as there wasn't like a vision where I sat down and said, this is the thing I have to create. It was more that, hey, I'm ready to go have my swing at this, and then I had to kind of iterate my way toward the ultimate design of the company. And here's the thing: we're still iterating constantly. About a year and a half ago, at this point of this recording, we pivoted to focus exclusively on our certification, and so that was a fun iteration. And then even from there, we've done micro iterations like reimagining the community and thinking about how we think about marketing and how we pursue go-to-market and these things. So it's a constant evolution. But I will say that it's all still rooted in this infatuation and love that I have for how to build high-functioning teams, how to foster collaboration, and this idea that like no one's as smart as everyone, and how do we extract the beauty of this kind of collaborative intelligence or this kind of collective intelligence, or we've often called it the room intelligence.
Yeah, two questions related to this. Was this whole concept of collaboration that you're talking about in the community, where there are no boundaries effectively, or people or the members come with different backgrounds, different aspirations, and so on, getting them together. And the second one was, would it be a good rephrasing to say that voltage control, or you would like to help individuals be more effective? In which case, the difference between, let's say, working with organizations, whether it is a role within the organization or as an external person, to working with individuals. And these are probably two different questions, but these are two things that came to my mind. One is about the community. How do you build cohesion in the community? People with diverse things. And second was, how do you switch between working with organizations or within some systems to individuals?
Yeah. So, I'll take the latter first. We were doing a lot of individual work even before the pivot, because we were hosting various workshops and events and whatnot. We had our annual summit that we were doing. And so we always considered that our B2C part of the business, our business to consumer. So these are individuals, sometimes funded by their company. They might have professional development budget, et cetera. But a lot of times people were finding us because they had a personal interest. It's about their personal growth, even if it's for business purposes and even funded. And so basically what we did is we just decided to, over time, we were gaining those skills and learning those techniques, and then ultimately pivoted to make that the sole purpose. And then I'll say that we still have some B2B business. It's a little blurry when someone comes to us as an individual and then has their business pay for it, because sometimes that opens up the conversation to doing a private program of some sort. Sometimes we just start off out of the gate talking with the business leader. So we've got a VP, and they're thinking about, how do I help my organization, the folks that report up into me, how do I help them be more collaborative in their approach? How do I help them learn facilitation skills so that they can be better at gathering people, getting alignment across influencers and stakeholders, or whatever the task might be. That's the example of how the B2B stuff works. So, I mean, really, the main shift has been how we show up to do the work, because, when we were purely, I would say when we were more kind of horizontally distributed and kind of more dilute in our focus, we were still doing quite a bit of facilitation, where we'd show up and facilitate things like design sprints or even, strategic planning sessions, what have you. And, that's quite a bit different from an execution standpoint to training, because it lends toward capability building whereas the other, you have a lens toward there's this specific business outcome that we're trying to deliver for folks. And it's maybe a little bit of both when you're doing corporate programs, because you're trying to think about that business value that you're trying to build through the enablement and through the capability building. But it's not so much of a pure play. We're just exclusively thinking, okay, their goal is to get like to 5x the user base on this project. So how do we bring in these facilitation techniques to help approach that challenge? So I think it wasn't that huge of a pivot because we were already experimenting with some of those things and growing them up. I will say this: the thing that we're still doing that is even reminiscent of our previous consulting practice is that when we do get bigger projects that come in front of us, we'll still consider those because it gives us an opportunity to bring our alumni into an engagement and deliver that in a way that gives them some experiences they wouldn't have had otherwise. Some real hands-on experience, and it also helps us kind of stay current, keeps a tight edge on our practice, because then we can bring those cases and those experiences back into the classroom and share with folks. But when it's something small, straightforward, simple, even if it's good money, we always hand that to our alumni. We just kind of pass it off. We don't take a cut or anything. It's just a benefit that we offer our alumni. And to me, that feels much better and much more natural to not compete with our alumni and do everything we can to set them up for success. Now, you mentioned the community as well. And, the community is comprised of 3 types of individuals. We have alumni, we have volunteers, and then we have community members that are just active community members. And the alumni, of course, have the shared connection around the experience they had going through the cohorts. And they have their cohort mates that are in the community as well. And so there's naturally some glue there between them. The volunteers also are kind of in this group together because they're volunteers. They kind of identify and know each other's other volunteers. There's volunteer meetings, and so they get together and connect and relate around that. The same as our regional leads. We gather the regional leads to connect, and so they feel a sense of connection and cohesion there. And I think the fact that we're investing so much in supporting and growing this volunteer base, they're also supporting and nurturing the health of and creating this feeling that it is about the community, not about voltage control pumping information in for people to consume. Now, we do pump in information for folks to consume in the professional side of the community, but that's exclusive for our alumni and our volunteers. It's our way of giving back to them and supporting them. And so I think that's really important to create a healthy dynamic. And also we started off and we designed everything and we led with the values at the center. So this idea of what the community means and why it exists and what it's for and what's the shared purpose that's connecting all of us. I think that is the real glue underneath it all.
Okay. So when you're building a community of people from diverse backgrounds, does the domain in which they're working or the variety or diversity in domains make it easier or difficult?
Well, I don't know if I necessarily think about it as an easy versus difficult thing. It's certainly a complexity that has to be examined because there's anytime we start adding more variables, more diversity, things start to get complex. They start to be adaptive. And so it really is about how congruent is your community to those elements that are emerging. If the system is adapting in ways that you unpredicted, does your design support that? And if not, the question is, should it? Because in some cases, there's something emerging that's antithetical to the values. And you should reject that thing that's emerging if it's antithetical to the values. If it's in alignment with the values, it should be embraced, and we should think about we should engage in some development work around the community to make sure we support that new thing that's emerging. And I think that so when you have diverse backgrounds and diverse context and diverse needs, then the question is, like, which of those should be supported? And if they're in alignment with the values, I'd say they should be. And so, there's a number of things we've done to design around that and support that. The volunteers is a big one, right? Because and the regional leads is another flavor of that, because a lot of times we notice that there is differences between regions, for sure, as far as like style and approach. And then also, if you are sharing this connection around locale and regionalities, language, history, background, that can help become that glue that holds you together when some of these other differences might be pulling you apart a little bit. Because it is important to maintain the whatever requisite structure you need to hold people together, so that when those differences pop up, you can support them, because then the community is much more richer for it. Because when those differences do appear and someone's asking, how do I oh my gosh, I hear what you're saying about facilitating these product like sessions in Silicon Valley startups, but I'm over here writing software at a motor company, and there's a lot of legacy process and thinking and how, and I'm dealing with embedded systems, and that's a whole limitation. How do I even do a prototype on an embedded system? And then that can lead to really interesting conversation that can be nuanced and can spark a lot of innovation. But if we don't structure things and support stuff that will allow those conversations to happen, we'll never, those miracles, those epiphanies will never happen.
Now that you have a platform and the community is growing, how do you think we could leverage the collective knowledge other than through the interactions that happen in those sessions?
Yeah, that's always an important pursuit. I think currently we're still in the growth mindset of establishing some critical mass. I think in a lot of ways we're there. And when I think about the time we spent relaunching the community and the behaviors I've seen it grow and build, I don't think we're quite there yet to step back and say, okay, this is a self-sustaining machine, if you will. I think that's my biggest focus right now, is getting it to the point where it's kind of feeding itself, it's supporting itself, and really investing in it in a way that helps make sure it has some real long-term staying power. And then I think, to your point, there's also things we'll need to think about long-term, as far as how do we look towards what all this output, all this connection and learning and realizations have, what kind of impact can it have more broadly in the world? I think, right now I'm taking more of a mindset of, if we create moments where people in the community come and are transformed or inspired in some way, there'll be little dandelion seeds that go out into the world and make great impact. And then also over time, we're packaging up things to help reinforce those moments happening. So, just being mindful of, how do we make sure it comes in, they get what they need, and we meet them where they're at, so that, whatever might shift the needle for them is front and center and easily accessible. One of the things that we've just now in the final stages of launching is what we call the Facilitation Lab Field Guide. It has 101 activities in it, and that was somewhat harvested from the community. We definitely collected ideas, and but ultimately we saw it as a need, something we could create to share with our regional leads to help them be more effective. And so, so that's my, my mentality is less about how do I broadcast it to the world so I can transfer the world, versus how do I continue to make this little sandbox I've created so much more valuable and more valuable and more valuable, so that the people that are there can continue to go out and do amazing things. And then that will have this effect of more people coming back in, and over time that we'll see more growth. So that's kind of my vision, is how do we, the people that come in the door, how do we help them do really amazing things?
Yeah, that sounds very, very exciting. And I didn't realize how long we've been going. So before we close, okay, I must ask you this question on facilitation as a career. Primarily for two segments of people: somebody who's, say, about to get into taking up a professional role, or people who've been doing some things for a while and either are a little tired of doing it, or looking for more excitement, or feel that they need a change. Is facilitation as a role or as a topic that they can get into? And would it be a full-time or a part-time kind of an engagement for them?
Yeah, it really is dependent on the individual. I will say that you don't have to be a quote unquote facilitator to benefit from facilitation skills. In fact, I would say a large percentage of our alumni are not quote unquote facilitators. A lot of chiefs of staff, a lot of project managers, product managers. These types of people are essentially boundary spanners. They exist at the edges of different silos and different compartments within inside of a company. And since they exist those boundaries at those edges, it's more easy for them to help connect the dots for people that are living inside these little bubbles. And so I think that's the real potential of facilitation, and we're going to see more and more of a need for this in the future as the world becomes more and more distributed, because there needs to be more connections established and bridging the gaps and whatnot. And sometimes, the facilitation work is not just purely in the moment of the meeting. Sometimes it's what you're doing between the meetings, preparing for the next one, teeing up the work. Maybe there's an asset that everyone's working on, shaping that, setting it up so that people have something to respond to, making sure that the information is getting shared in ways that facilitate the decisions need to come. Even if we need to make a decision asynchronously, thinking about the protocol for that and setting that up and making it happen, whipping those votes, so to speak. So I would say by and large, people that learn these skills can have huge impact on their career, even if they don't pivot into a role as a facilitator. Now, if someone does want to pivot into that role, there are some companies that will hire facilitators full time. The one thing to be aware of is that that role is quite often misinterpreted. Like, you got different people with different definitions of facilitators. So if you are applying to facilitator jobs that are quote unquote facilitator, it's really important to dig in a little bit and understand better how they envision that role. What is a day in the life? What are some specific things they'll be expecting of you? I'd say most people that have facilitator in their title are freelance or working for an agency that does this kind of work. And, that can be anywhere from part-time to full-time. And the other thing I'll say is, if you are thinking about doing it full-time or becoming a freelancer, it's all about the network and the referrals and getting really specific on the kinds of stuff you want to work with, the kinds of people you want to work with, the kinds of problems you want to help solve, and getting really crisp and clear on that and articulating that well will help draw in the opportunities, because then people will more easily identify, like, oh, this person is the one that's going to help me solve that problem.
Yeah, that's a very reassuring note, I would say, that as a skill, facilitation is going to help any role, is what I kind of take away from what you said.
Yeah, if you're working with other people, then, oftentimes people, when they think about leadership skills, they'll gravitate to like executive presence, presentation, maybe like reading financial reports and these kinds of things. But I would argue that your ability to present, your ability to seem, look confident, etc., while can be valuable, I think it's overrated, especially when you compare it to someone who's really able to activate a room, to get people collaborating and working and helping, like, put differences aside and move in the spirit of a shared vision. And if you can do that, then you're going to be a highly effective leader, and facilitation skills are like pretty much paramount to accomplishing those things.
That note, thanks a lot, Douglas, for taking time and sharing a lot of gems, I would say, that one can pick up a read through. We'll also include your contact details and more details in the show notes. So thanks once again.
Great. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.